My hands trembled as I unfolded the yellowed partnership agreement under the UV lamp, watching the ink fluoresce. My brother Marcus's authentic signature from 4 years ago glowed with the characteristic blue-white shimmer of a gel pen manufactured in 2020, the tagans forming a crisp, unbroken line. Right next to it, the clumsy forgery he'd banked his entire future on fluoresced with a different spectral curve, the chemical stabilizers betraying a production date at least 18 months too late. That single sheet of paper didn't just prove he'd drained my entire retirement and forged my name on a $680,000 sale to a veterinary chain. It would eventually land him in a county-issued jumpsuit, on his knees scrubbing kennel runs while every adoption brochure at Karma Kennels featured his booking photo under the headline, "This man stole his sister's future." Here's exactly how I dismantled my brother's betrayal with nothing but an old lockpick set, a UV light, and the dead man's switch our mother left behind. I'm Claire, 47 years old. By trade, I'm a locksmith, or I was for 2 decades until a rotator cuff tear that never quite healed properly forced me to pivot into managing a handful of small rental properties. My shoulder had sidelined me from heavy installs, but my fingers hadn't forgotten a single tumbler's feel, and I still kept my kit oiled and ready. That skill set became a cornerstone of what happened later, but at the start, I was just a woman with a dog and a retirement account. Marcus, my younger brother by 3 years, was the family showman. He could sell ice to a penguin and make you feel grateful for the privilege. 2 years ago, he came to me with an immaculate business plan for a premium dog training and boarding facility. Climate-controlled suites with individual webcams, a hydrotherapy pool with underwater treadmill, a professional agility course laid with shock-absorbing turf, and a grooming spa that looked like a human salon. He needed $110,000 to lock in the commercial lease and start construction. I had exactly that amount sitting in a traditional IRA, a quiet nest egg I'd built with overtime and sensible index funds my knees and back had paid for one key at a time. He promised me a notarized 45% ownership stake, and the detail that tipped my heart over the cliff, free lifetime boarding for my 12-year-old chocolate Labrador, Gus. Gus had severe hip dysplasia that made every stare a negotiation, and I couldn't bear the thought of him suffering in a standard concrete run kennel if I ever had to travel or faced a medical emergency. I liquidated the IRA, paid the early withdrawal penalties, and the tax hit, and we signed the partnership documents in front of a notary with our mother Alice as witness. She hugged me after, her hands thin and cool on my shoulders, and whispered, "You've got a good heart, Claire. Don't ever let anyone take advantage of that." I thought she was being sentimental. I had no idea she'd already seen the cracks in Marcus's facade, the way his eyes would flick sideways when he talked about projected revenue, the small evasions and sudden new cars. She never confronted him directly. Instead, she'd been quietly fortifying my position for months, building a legal trap I wouldn't discover until she was gone. Mom died of a massive stroke 6 months ago, so sudden she was gone before the ambulance cleared the driveway. The morning of the funeral, I stood in the church basement with a plate of untouched cucumber sandwiches and felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. The day after, before the flowers had even started to wilt, Marcus and his wife Tanya pulled into my driveway in their pearl-white Mercedes G-Wagon, the engine so silent I didn't hear them until the doorbell rang. Tanya wore a black sheath dress that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and she immediately began inventorying Mom's possessions on her tablet, tapping at the screen with acrylic nails, talking about estate sales and staging as if she were curating a boutique. Marcus kept patting my shoulder and saying, "Let us handle everything, sis. You're too fragile." I was indeed shattered. My grief was so heavy I could barely form sentences, my sleep a wreck, my appetite gone. But I wasn't blind. I saw the way Tanya's fingers lingered on Mom's jewelry box, the way Marcus's tone turned businesslike when he thought I wasn't listening, the way he'd already Googled probate shortcuts on his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. 2 days later, while Marcus met with an appraiser and Tanya photographed the china for an online auction, I climbed the pull-down stairs to Mom's attic. The air was thick with cedar and old wool, the smell of her cardigans and the blankets she'd knitted during long winters. I wasn't searching for anything specific. I was just chasing her scent, trying to feel close to her for one more minute. I sat on the unfinished plywood floor, the dust motes floating in the single shaft of light from the gable window, and let the tears come. When I wiped my eyes, I noticed a dusty shoebox half hidden under a box of Christmas ornaments. My name was scrawled across the lid in black Sharpie, her handwriting shaky but deliberate, as if she'd been in a hurry but wanted no mistake about who it belonged to. I opened it there, surrounded by the ghosts of her things. Among old report cards and photos of me at 8 holding a puppy was a manila envelope labeled K9 Partners. The ink on the label was fresh enough, the blue ballpoint crisp, to make my stomach tighten. I slid out the contents and my throat locked up. It was the original partnership agreement, all 11 pages. Both our signatures, the notary stamp, the addendum guaranteeing Gus's free boarding in exactly the kind of detail a court would love, specifying the suite size, the temperature controls, the access to hydrotherapy, the on-call vet. I'd lost my copy years ago in a basement flood, and Marcus had insisted everything was digitized, that the physical original was in a fireproof safe, that I didn't need to worry. Clipped to the back page was a single sheet of Mom's floral stationery. Her handwriting, even with the tremor of age, was legible. It said, "Claire, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Marcus was on the phone last spring talking about dissolving your stake. I saw a draft where he'd already forged your signature. I hid this box for you. Do not trust him. Save yourself and Gus." The word yourself was underlined 3 times. I pressed the paper to my chest and felt the heat of her warning like a brand, a burn that cut right through the fog of grief. She'd known, and instead of confronting Marcus and risking him covering his tracks, she'd built a quiet trap, waiting in the dark like a spider for the fly to land. Right then I heard the attic ladder creak. Marcus's head appeared through the opening, his hair immaculate, his smile a fraction too tight, the corners of his mouth pulling the skin around his eyes. "What's that, just old junk? Let me toss it for you." He reached out, his fingers already closing on the shoebox's edge, his grip too eager. I clutched it to my chest and let a sob shake my shoulders, the grief suddenly useful as camouflage. "Mom's keepsakes," I choked, the words raw and wet, my throat tearing. "I need them right now. I can't let go of anything. Please, just let me have this." He rolled his eyes, a tiny flicker of irritation he couldn't suppress, and retreated down the ladder with a muttered, "Fine, just don't let it become a hoarding thing." The moment his footsteps faded, I slid the envelope inside my jacket, pressing it flat against my ribs, my heart drumming against the paper. That was the instant I knew my brother had already decided I was an obstacle, a loose end to be snipped clean. And I, the quiet sister who fixed locks and balanced ledgers, began to plan. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that family should never be a get-out-of-jail-free card for betrayal. Now, back to the moment I realized I was trapped in the home of the people who intended to destroy me. That evening, Marcus and Tanya sat me down at their polished quartz kitchen island, the kind with a waterfall edge that costs more than a used sedan. A stack of papers waited. The top document a durable power of attorney granting Marcus full authority over all joint family financial interests. A phrase deliberately vague enough to include the Kennel partnership, Mom's estate, and even my rental properties under a consolidated debt package they'd already drafted. Tanya kept patting my hand, her voice dripping with false honey, her nails acrylic and sharp, leaving tiny crescents in my skin. "This is just to protect you, Claire. You've been through so much. Let us carry the legal weight." I scanned the fine print, my eyes darting across the clauses while keeping my face slack. If I signed, he could sell the business, empty joint accounts, and refinance my 3 rentals into a single high-interest note that would leave me homeless if they defaulted, a balloon payment I'd never survive. The document had a backdating line, effective as of March 1st, 3 weeks before Mom died, which meant he'd been preparing this before she was even cold. I let my eyes go unfocused and my voice thick, pretending the grief had stolen my cognition, my short-term memory a fog. I said I couldn't even remember my ATM PIN, that I was forgetting simple things like whether I'd locked the front door, and I needed a few days to think clearly. I mumbled something about a neurologist appointment, something about brain fog from the stress. Marcus's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek like a fish on a line, but Tanya beamed, her veneers gleaming. "Of course, sweetie. And you shouldn't be alone in that big empty house. It'll just make the depression worse. Move into our guest house. We'll take care of everything, meals, laundry, all of it." I agreed because I needed to be inside their home, near their files, their computers, their careless late-night conversations, where I could watch and listen and wait. I moved Gus to a trusted friend's house, a retired vet tech I'd known for 15 years, under the guise of needing a break from his care, the real reason being that I couldn't risk him as a hostage if things went sideways. I packed a small bag, my lockpick kit nestled in the side pocket, the leather soft and familiar, and stepped into the lion's den. The guest house was a converted pool cabana with a separate entrance, a kitchenette, and paper-thin walls. I could hear their television, their arguments, their phone calls. I kept up the act of a confused, foggy sister who shuffled in slippers and napped at odd hours, sometimes drifting off mid-sentence so they'd leave me alone. I let my hair go unwashed and wore the same cardigan for days, selling the image of a woman unraveling. Meanwhile, I watched. Marcus paced the patio taking hushed phone calls, and I cracked the bathroom window, the one that faced the grill, to catch the fragments that floated through. "Vet Corp wants the title clean by Friday," I heard him say, his voice tight as a drum. "Tell the lender we'll have the full buyout amount next week." No, she hasn't signed yet, but she will. She's barely functional. She can't even remember where she put her keys. I memorized the name Vet Corp and spent that night on my phone, hidden under the covers with the brightness dimmed to a sliver, researching. It was a national veterinary chain that had been aggressively acquiring independent boarding facilities, rolling them into a corporate model with standardized branding and centralized billing. They had the capital to move fast, cash offers within 10 business days, and Marcus would be desperate to close before anyone asked too many questions. Tanya, meanwhile, was spending money they didn't have. Her Instagram became a slideshow of acquisition. A $10,000 espresso machine arrived in a crate the size of a refrigerator, the delivery guys struggling with a dolly. She booked a vacation rental in Costa Rica and posted screenshots of the confirmation, #blessed, tagging Marcus. She leased a new delivery van for the Kennel, a custom-wrapped Sprinter with the business logo, even though the old one ran perfectly fine, the wrap alone costing $3,000. Every swipe of her card was another red flag that they were counting on a massive cash infusion. The Vet Corp acquisition would give them that if they could erase me first. 10 days into my so-called convalescence, an accident gave me my first real opening. Tanya was trying to unlock the tall gray filing cabinet in Marcus's home office, a 4-drawer Han model with a tubular wafer lock. She must have been in a hurry, her hand shaking with frustration, because the key snapped cleanly in the cylinder, the broken head clattering onto the hardwood floor. She swore loud enough to carry through the whole house, a string of words that would have made our mother blush. She called for me, her voice edged with the kind of impatience that meant she'd forgotten she was supposed to be caring for a fragile sister. "Claire, you used to do locks, right? Can you get this open? I've got a tax form due and Marcus is useless with anything mechanical." I almost laughed. That cabinet was practically an old friend. I'd serviced hundreds of that exact model over the years, knew the wafer spacing by heart, knew that the wafers would bind if I applied too much tension, and that a light touch was everything. I went to my bag in the guest house and retrieved my leather lockpick kit, a compact set I'd kept since my apprenticeship, the tools worn smooth from decades of use, the half-diamond pick still my favorite. I knelt by the cabinet, the familiar weight of the tension wrench in my fingers. I slid the small tension wrench into the keyway, applying just enough rotational force to bind the wafers without oversetting them, feeling the subtle resistance of each brass disc. I used the half-diamond pick to manipulate the wafers one by one, starting from the one closest to the opening, lifting each until I felt the tiny give, the click that meant it was aligned at the shear line. In under 2 minutes, I extracted the broken key with a hooked extractor tool and opened the lock smoothly, handing her the little brass stump. Tanya thanked me absently, already diving into the top drawer, rifling through folders, muttering about a missing Schedule C. She dismissed me entirely, not even watching as I walked away. But I'd noticed the bottom drawer had a second cam lock, a cheap wafer model, and they'd been so careless they hadn't relocked it after the last use, probably in a hurry. I waited until 2 a.m., when the main house went dark and the only sound was the hum of the pool filter. I crept back with a penlight, my heart a steady drum in my ears, my slippers making no sound on the tile. The bottom drawer held a hanging folder labeled Vet Corp Acquisitions. Inside was a draft purchase agreement to sell Marcus Collins DBA Pinnacle Canine Academy to the chain for $680,000. The asset list included the leasehold, equipment, client contracts, and all intellectual property. The signatory page contained my name, Claire Donovan, and a signature that approximated my own. At a glance, it might fool a rushed notary, the capital C looping like mine, the slant roughly similar. But under my penlight, the loop on the C was too angular, the slant leaned backward instead of forward, and the pen pressure was too heavy, leaving grooves in the paper I'd never make. It was a forgery that would have earned a failing grade in any intro to document examination course. Next to it sat a notarized statement of dissolution of partnership, claiming I'd surrendered my 45% stake for a one-time payment of $12,000, a pittance. Clipped behind it was a photocopy of a cashier's check in that exact amount, made out to me, with an endorsement signature that was clearly forged, the same telltale angular loops and backward slant. The check had been mailed to my old address a week ago, but I'd never seen it. Marcus must have intercepted my mail, maybe with a forwarding order, or just grabbed it before I looked. I photographed every document with my phone, making sure to capture the paper's texture, the notary's stamp impression, the slight smudge on the ink where the pen had dragged. Then, in the wastebasket beneath the desk, I spotted the crown jewel. A wad of cross-cut shredded papers, the kind that turned documents into confetti squares about a quarter-inch across. Years of rekeying locks and dealing with tiny broken key fragments had trained my hands for delicate work, the kind of patience that can realign a pin tumbler 1 micrometer at a time. I collected the shreds in a Ziploc bag, and over the next 3 nights, sat at the guest house kitchen table with tweezers, cellophane tape, and a magnifying lamp, reconstructing the strips like an archaeological puzzle. I sorted by paper color first, laying out piles of slightly off-white document paper and bright white printer paper. Then I sorted by the subtle variations in cut angle that cross-cut shredders leave, matching the diamond patterns where possible. Each piece I taped to a sheet of thin cardstock, working from the edges inward, my fingers moving with the same rhythm I used to use when assembling master key systems, aligning tiny pins in a tensioned cylinder. Some strips were only a quarter-inch wide, but I could match the alignment of typed characters, the half-letters that lined up into whole words. Partial C and a partial O that together spelled company, a leg of a capital R that connected to a evenue to spell revenue. Most of the shreds were bank statements revealing the kennel was hemorrhaging money, that Marcus had taken out a high-interest hard money loan at 18% just to stay afloat, the interest alone a monthly drain. But one reconstructed page was a draft of the dissolution statement, with margin notes in Marcus's handwriting. I read the words through the magnifying lamp, my pulse hammering. Backdate to March. Use the same blue gel pen we used for original docs. Ink Hunter brand, 0, 7 mm. That note was forensic suicide. He was consciously selecting a pen to match the original agreement's signing date, a maneuver that would definitively prove premeditated forgery under any document examiner's analysis. I sat back in the dim light, the taped puzzle forming an indictment, and allowed myself one small, cold smile. Beyond the documents, I gathered audio. I started carrying my phone with the voice memo app ready, and on a Thursday afternoon, while I pretended to doze on the patio lounger, my mouth slightly open, sunglasses perched on my nose, Marcus took a call with the kitchen door cracked open. I heard him say, "No, the silent partner won't be a problem. I've got a dissolution already signed and notarized. She doesn't even know what she signed, honestly. Grief's made her stupid. No, the original partnership agreement is gone. I made sure of that years ago. The copy in the safe is just a blank shell. By the time anyone asks questions, the money will be in the account and the deed will be with Vet Corp. Just relax." He laughed, a short, ugly sound. I kept my eyes closed and my breathing even, recording every syllable. That recording, I knew, would never be admissible without a warrant, but it told me everything I needed to know about his timeline and his contempt. He'd taken my retirement and my trust, and now he was banking on my grief to break me. I knew I needed an ally with authority, someone who could take what I'd found and turn it into a legal fortress. The next morning I drove to Mom's local bank, a small community branch with old-fashioned wood paneling, and a teller named Bernice who'd known Mom since before I was born, back when you could get a lollipop with your deposit slip. I'd accompanied Mom once years ago to store some jewelry in her safe deposit box, but I'd never been a signer. When I presented my ID and her death certificate, the branch manager, a meticulous man named Mr. Delgado, paused. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and a tie with tiny math equations on it. He pulled up the box's file, and his expression shifted from sympathetic to something more focused. MS. Donovan, your mother established a codicil on this box 4 months before she passed. It's structured so that only you, personally and physically, can access it after her death. No executor or power of attorney can override this. It requires your thumbprint and signature simultaneously. Matched to a specific digital template, she filed with our secure vault system. He led me to a private room with a biometric scanner, a small device that glowed green as I pressed my thumb to the glass, the ridges of my print aligning with the stored template. I signed the digital pad, the stylus gliding, and the system chimed its acceptance. Inside the box lay a single thick envelope sealed with a notary's embossed foil stamp, the circle of impressed foil glinting. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a notarized copy of the original Kennel partnership agreement, identical to the one I'd found in the attic, but this one had an additional rider, a clause Mom had insisted on, that any dissolution or transfer required my physical, in-person signature, verified by video recording at this specific bank. It was a dead man's switch, and a letter from Mom dated 6 months prior. She wrote that she'd overheard Marcus on speakerphone bragging to a friend about how he'd handle Claire's signature, and that she'd been quietly working with an estate attorney to lock the foundational partnership document into this box, knowing that if Marcus ever tried to dissolve the business, he'd need my genuine wet signature, and any forgery would be voided in court. She also included a voided check from a joint household account showing small, irregular transfers from the Kennel's operating funds into his personal account, embezzlement that stretched back 2 years, the amounts always just under a reporting threshold. The letter ended, "Use this to bury him legally. I'm sorry I raised one wrong tree." I folded the letter carefully, feeling her presence in the room with me, the steadying hand I needed. Mr. Delgado sat with me for an hour after that, and he introduced me to Sandra Okonkwo, the bank's compliance officer for financial crimes. Sandra was a quiet woman with sharp eyes and a background that included a stint as an FBI liaison. When she reviewed the documents, her demeanor went from sympathetic to professionally outraged. She spread the evidence across the conference table, lining up the partnership agreement, the forged dissolution, and the voided check. "This is textbook wire fraud, Claire. The sale to Vet Corp crosses state lines because their corporate office is in Nevada. The forged check is a federal instrument, and the elder financial exploitation regarding your mother's estate, even peripheral, gives us jurisdiction. I'm required to file a suspicious activity report today, but I can also loop in the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force directly. We need one final piece, however, irrefutable proof that the signature on the dissolution is a forgery, not just your word or a handwriting comparison, but scientific evidence that will hold up in court and survive a Daubert challenge." I told her about the original agreement in my possession and the reconstructed note about the blue gel pen. Sandra made a call to a forensic document examiner named Dr. Elaine Merritt, a woman who'd testified in federal court over 60 times and whose reports were rarely challenged. I met Elaine in a sterile lab 3 days later, a room filled with machines that hummed and glowed, the air smelling faintly of ozone. She used a video spectral comparator, a device that bombards ink with different wavelengths of light and measures the reflectance curves. The original's blue gel ink, she explained, contained specific tagans and optical brighteners consistent with Ink Hunter brand manufactured in 2020, with a fluorescence peak at 480 nanometers. The forged document's ink, while the same brand, contained a different chemical stabilizer mix that Ink Hunter only introduced in late 2022, a full 18 months after the supposed signing date. The difference was invisible to the naked eye, but blazed under the VSC's filters like neon. She also performed electrostatic detection for indented writing, a process that uses a charged film and toner to reveal impressions left on the page underneath. On the forged page itself, she found the ghostly imprint of Marcus's note about backdating, the pressure of his pen transferring the words, "Use the same blue gel pen," directly onto the very document he was trying to falsify. The indentation recorded the downward stroke of the B in blue, the cross of the T in same. She glanced up from the machine, her face illuminated by its screen, and said, "If this went to trial, I'd call it a confessed forgery, no question. The indented writing is the killer. It's like he wrote his own confession and signed it, just not in ink." I felt a wave of gratitude so intense my knees almost buckled. Meanwhile, Sandra gave me a small USB device disguised as a standard office charger, the kind you'd plug into a power strip and forget. It was a keylogger with a tiny onboard memory that would record every keystroke typed on the connected computer, storing the data until retrieval. She said, "If you can plug this into his desktop for 12 hours, we'll capture his keystrokes and any login credentials to the business accounts. That'll give us the probable cause we need for a warrant for his entire digital footprint, emails, accounting software, the works. It's perfectly legal if you're a resident of the household, and there's no expectation of privacy in a common area, and we've confirmed the office is considered a common space. Just be careful." I tucked it in my pocket, the small black rectangle feeling heavy with purpose, and headed back to the guest house, knowing I needed to walk a tightrope for just a little longer, to stay in the role of the grieving fool until the trap was fully set. Before I planted the device, I staged the moment that would annihilate any remaining scrap of family loyalty in my heart. I needed to know, definitively, whether there was any human being left inside my brother. Around 7 that evening, while Marcus and Tanya were sharing a bottle of wine on the patio, laughing about something shallow, I walked into the living room through the connecting door. I'd practiced the collapse in the small bathroom mirror, the stumble, the clutch of the chest, the fall. I clutched my chest with both hands, a theatrical gasp escaping my lips, and I made sure to knock over the heavy side table on my way down. A ceramic lamp shattered, the sound sharp as a gunshot. I let out a strangled gasp and went limp on the area rug, my eyes half open, breathing shallow and erratic, just enough to seem like a stroke or a heart attack. The fibers of the rug pressed into my cheek. Through my lashes, I saw Marcus bolt to his feet, but he didn't rush to me. He didn't call for an ambulance. Instead, he stepped directly over my body, the sole of his loafer grazing my forearm, and went straight to his briefcase on the ottoman. He pulled out the vet corp folder and said, his voice utterly flat, "If she's stroking out, we need her to sign the final release before the paramedics get here. Grab her hand." Tanya didn't move to help either. She looked down at me with cold annoyance and said, "You think she's faking?" Marcus replied, "I don't care. We have the notary stamp and the ink pad. Let's just get her thumbprint and scribble the rest. No one will know the difference." The smell of the red wine on his breath reached me, sour and dark, and I felt something calcify in my chest. That was the moment my brother died to me, the cord of shared childhood and whispered secrets snapping clean. I let a groan roll out and stirred, pretending to come to, gasping about a dizzy spell, about low blood sugar, about how embarrassed I was. I whispered something about not having eaten enough. They put on masks of concern so fast it was almost comical, Tanya fetching water with a solicitous smile, Marcus kneeling with a worried frown and patting my shoulder. That night, when they were both in the master suite, I slipped into the office, plugged the keylogger into the back of his tower where it blended with the monitor cables, and covered it with a spare power brick from the drawer. 12 hours later, I retrieved it, my hands steady, my heart cold. The data capture was a treasure trove. His banking passwords, stored in an unencrypted notepad file. His email drafts to the vet corp attorney discussing how to neutralize the silent partner and minimize the siblings' awareness until after closing. And an encrypted file path that contained the full forged document folder, untouched since he'd created it, the metadata still showing the creation dates. Sandra and the FBI task force obtained warrants within 48 hours. They dove into his accounts, found the $12,000 cashier's check that had been diverted and cashed into a shell account registered in Nevada, traced the hard money loan that was bleeding the business, and froze all assets pending investigation. But they needed a clean sting to avoid evidence spoliation, a moment where he'd try to execute the final blow, and we'd catch him in the act. We decided to use his greed as the trap. I called Marcus, my voice trembling with perfectly manufactured terror. "The bank called about Mom's safe deposit box. There's a problem with the codicil. They need me to sign some release or they'll seal it forever. I'm so scared, Marcus. Can you come with me? I don't understand any of it. The letter they sent has all this legal language. He practically salivated. I could hear it over the phone, the quickening of his breath, the edge of excitement. Within the hour, he and Tanya drove me to the same branch, with Mr. Delgado and 2 undercover agents positioned as loan officers, their badges hidden but their eyes watchful, their earpieces discreet. 2 more agents were dressed as bank customers, sitting in the lobby with newspapers. In the small conference room, the air conditioning humming, Marcus slid a document across the polished table. It was a limited power of attorney for safe deposit box access and custodial rights, written in dense legalese, but boiling down to granting him complete control over the box and all its contents, with a clause indemnifying him from any liability. He pressed a pen into my hand, a generic blue gel that might have been the same Ink Hunter brand he'd specified in his note. "Sign right here, Claire. I'll handle the bank. This is the only way to protect Mom's things from the IRS. They'll freeze everything if we don't act today." I looked at the pen, the light catching its plastic barrel, and I let a small, exhausted smile cross my face. I set the pen down, the small click of it against the wood the loudest sound in the room. "You should have read Mom's handwriting more carefully, Marcus. She knew you'd cheat, so she made sure I'd own every square inch of Karma Kennels. You never understood that some boxes only open when the right person holds the key." I nodded imperceptibly toward the security camera in the corner of the ceiling, the little red light blinking. The door opened and 2 FBI agents in plainclothes stepped in, badges out, their movements practiced and calm. "Marcus Collins, Tanya Collins, you're under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit financial exploitation, and attempted elder abuse." Tanya's scream could have shattered glass, a high, animal sound that bounced off the walls. Marcus lunged for the folder, but one agent already had him in a compliance hold, his arm twisted behind his back, the other cuffing Tanya as she shrieked. I watched the color drain from his face, the smug confidence evaporating into slack-jawed disbelief, and I felt nothing but the clean, cold wind of vindication. The consequences were absolute, the legal machinery grinding with satisfying precision. The $680,000 vet corp sale was voided outright because my signature was forged, and the chain, eager to avoid negative publicity, pulled out entirely, leaving Marcus with nothing but a canceled contract and a mountain of legal fees. The hard money lender called in the 18% loan and seized Marcus's personal assets when he couldn't pay. Their house, the Mercedes, the Costa Rica deposit, the fancy espresso machine, all liquidated at auction. Marcus was convicted on 3 federal felony counts after a trial that lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution used Dr. Merritt's forensic ink analysis as the centerpiece, her testimony a clinic in scientific precision as she demonstrated the spectral curves and the indented writing. The reconstructed shred evidence was projected onto a screen, the taped strips forming the damning note, and the jury's faces hardened. Marcus was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, but the judge, an older woman with a no-nonsense reputation, suspended 2 of those years on the unusual condition that he complete 500 hours of community service at the very business he tried to steal. And I got creative with that. I'd already assumed full legal ownership of the kennel through the court's declaratory judgment, and I renamed it Karma Kennels, the logo a stylized scale with a paw print at the center. The judge approved my request that during every hour of his service, Marcus wear a high-visibility orange safety vest with bold black letters on the back reading, "I stole my sister's retirement." The local news did a segment on it, the camera lingering on Marcus scrubbing a kennel run while a cheerful pit bull wagged nearby, and our adoption inquiries tripled overnight. Now every adoption brochure includes a small photo of him in that vest, standing beside a rescue dog with a goofy grin, under the caption, "At Karma Kennels, we believe in second chances. We just never forget what some people forfeit." Tanya, who pled to lesser charges, was ordered to complete 100 hours of community service alongside him, though in a plain vest, which somehow made it worse for her. She'd been a woman who curated a life of curated perfection, and now she was sweeping dog hair in a plain gray smock, her Instagram silent for the first time in years. I received restitution through the liquidation of his seized assets, enough to replenish my IRA fully, and fund a small expansion of the kennel's senior dog wing, a sunlit space with heated floors and ramps and a plaque reading, Alice's haven. I moved Gus into a sunny apartment I built above the grooming bay, where he has an orthopedic bed the size of a small sofa and a ramp to a private yard. His hip pain, managed with daily swims in the hydrotherapy pool Marcus had so proudly installed. I run the kennel with transparency and integrity now. Every new hire gets a copy of Mom's letter and a mandatory tutorial on forgery detection, taught by me. Using the same UV lamp and spectral comparator charts Dr. Merritt supplied. I keep the display in the lobby, a glass case with the original agreement, the reconstructed shred note, and the laboratory ink analysis report, all labeled and explained. People often ask if I feel vindictive. I don't. I feel precise. The lock I had to pick wasn't just the filing cabinet or the safe deposit box. It was the entire mechanism of my own misplaced trust. My mother built a deadman's switch into the system because she knew that some people treat boundaries as inconveniences, and those people have already factored your destruction into their budget. Trust isn't a family inheritance. It's a privilege you revoke the instant someone steps over your body to grab a pen. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? Tell me in the comments. If you believe karma should be delivered in a bright orange vest, hit like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.